Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, December 24th, 2020, and today we're going to be taking a look at the election turnout for the Georgia runoff election. So we don't know who is going to control the United States Senate. Currently, the Republican Party has 50 seats and the Democratic Party has 48 seats. And we can actually take a look at the early voting statistics in the 2021 Senate runoff elections. There are two elections up, two Senate elections, and we actually have some very interesting turnout numbers as we are very close to the upcoming election. Jon Ossoff, I believe, has just broken a fundraising record for the most raised in a singular period of time. He has now hit the most money raised for a single Democratic candidate ever in United States history in a Senate election and in a House election. I find that very fascinating. Jon Ossoff, someone who has never been elected to public office, holds the record for the highest fundraising Democrat in United States history in both the House of Representatives and in the Senate. So he's taken the title for both. There's only one other representative who has ever raised more money than him in the House, and that is Representative Steve Scalise. But other than that, he's raised the most money for any House election, $31.5 million. And then in the Senate elections, Jamie Harrison raised $54 million in one quarter. Jon Ossoff, in just 2 months, raised over $100 million for his campaign. That's another video. We'll talk about that in the future. But today, we're going to be taking a look at the early voting statistics and talk about why this 2 million number that you see in the title, that you are going to probably hear through news sources, because it's super big. This is a huge deal for the runoff elections. Nobody really expected this super high turnout. 11 days prior to the election, or 12 days prior to the election. There are still so many days left to go. And interestingly enough, the numbers are holding. I made a video discussing why the early voting numbers actually benefited the Democratic Party. And over 500,000 votes later, they still do by just the same exact margins. Georgia could very well go from having 2 Republican senators to 2 Democratic senators from 2016 to 2020, the same way Arizona did. And it would actually coincide with that state flipping for the first time since 1996. And Georgia flipping for the first time in 28 years. Back in 1992 was the last time Georgia went to a Democrat on the presidential level. So tides are changing. It's different time periods. Looking at the Georgia results, Joe Biden won by a very narrow amount. But this was on the backs of a number of minority voters, a number of white suburban voters that shifted their vote, or at least voted in higher amounts. We actually see the state of Georgia with its narrowest margin of victory for a presidential, I believe actually the narrowest victory since Bill Clinton, the last time a Democrat won in the state of Georgia. So looking at this state, it was exceptionally close in 1992, it was exceptionally close in 2020, and I have no doubt that the runoff elections will be any different. And we can actually take a look at the early voting statistics for the 2020 election. 4 million early votes out of roughly 5 million votes cast. So the Republican Party is probably expecting around 1 million votes on Election Day. But based off the early voting statistics, they actually break it down by race and ethnicity. And overall, 56.5% of the early voters in the state of Georgia were white, non-Hispanic white voters. In terms of black voters, they made up 27.7% of the early voting population. Hispanic voters made up 2.6% of the early voting population. Non-Hispanic Asian American voters made up an additional 2.6%. Non-Hispanic Native American voters made up 0.1%. And then others /multiple/unknown was 10.5%. As of this election, white turnout is down, and as is a number of other demographic groups. Every single demographic group is down except for one. There is only one demographic group that is up, and that is non-Hispanic black voters. Currently, non-Hispanic black voters, I'm just going to refer to them as black voters from now on, have voted 58.5% of their total early vote in the 2020 general election. Are any of the other demographic groups comparable in terms of the turnout number? The answer is no. The closest is non-Hispanic white voters, which have voted 50.3% of their 2020 early voting turnout. So that's an 8-point difference. It goes down to 46.5 for Asian voters, 46% for Native American voters, 41% for others /multiple/unknown, and 39% for Hispanic voters. So when we're looking at the state of Georgia, there is only one demographic group that has went above the halfway point, and that is black voters, with still 12 days to go until the election. We have 2 million votes cast in this state. 2 million votes cast. And the Democratic Party is making sure that everyone votes. The Democratic Party is trying to ensure that they win these runoff elections, because the Republican Party While they still need the majority, they can do it with just one Senate election. The Democratic Party needs both. The Democratic Party needs both Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock to win the election. The Democratic Party cannot afford to either let Kelly Loeffler or David Perdue win, because if they do, it's practically game over. Now, there have been some Republicans, such as Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney, that have been open to the idea of working with the Biden administration. That won't necessarily be as troubling as if, there was more prominent Republican figures who were more leaning towards the right. Mitt Romney is a more traditional Republican. He's actually a bit more to the right than he was back when he ran for president in 2012. But then again, he does represent one of the most conservative and traditional states in the country. For Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, both of them come from states that were decided by 10 points or less in the presidential election. So they are still coming from states where they won't necessarily seal their fates if they vote for a Biden nominee or for a piece of Biden legislation that they may think is fit. Lisa Murkowski is up in 2022, but Alaska just passed ranked choice voting. I believe that she will win based off that alone. But overall, the Senate election is now coming down to a state where we have seen roughly 50% total turnout of the early vote. If you're looking at the amount of people that voted early, 4 million, the amount of people that in the regular election, 4 million. In this election, 2 million, with still a pretty significant way to go. And the reason why it's not exactly right where the general election voting data was is because the state of Georgia and a number of other states typically see decreased turnout in runoff elections. There are very few cases, even in American history, where runoff elections or special elections or just off-year elections have higher turnout than presidential election years or a midterm election year. That typically, doesn't happen. That rarely ever happens, and I think barely in any special Senate elections. Maybe in some House elections, but not usually. But if we actually see matched turnout, we could see a very similar repeat of what actually happened on the presidential race. We could see the Democratic Party narrowly take a victory here. Joe Biden won by 0.24%. It was extremely, extremely narrow. Out of 5 million votes cast, he won by 12,000 votes. But if the Democratic Party is able to match the level of turnout, and these numbers hold, the total early votes by race and ethnicity, if these numbers hold, we will be seeing an increase of 4 points, an increase of 4% more black voters in the state of Georgia early, and a decrease of white voters. What that means is that the Democratic Party would likely benefit from that, because black voters typically split, at least on the national level, have split practically 85 to 15. 85% for the Democrats, 15% for the other candidates, whether Republican, whether independent, whatever it might be. 85 to 15. That is something that the Democratic Party should be very happy about. They should be very happy about these early voting numbers and should be very happy that 2 million people have voted already, because that's a good indicator that Georgia may not turn out as poorly as they originally thought. Now, there is still probably going to be a slowed down, early voting tally just because it's Christmas season. It's going right into the new year. People are at home with their family. They may not be too inclined to go risk getting COVID-19 by voting early or voting in person. But on January 5th, that will be the final day, and we will probably see maybe 3 million votes cast in the state of Georgia right before that election. And we will see what the early voting turnout is. The regular election day turnout voting is. Because if that turnout is high, the Republican Party might be able to relax. But if it isn't, the numbers don't lie right now, the Democratic Party probably would win based off of the early vote right now. Based off this percent in terms of the amount of people of color voting. White voters are at 55.5%. Every other demographic group totals up to 44.5%. So right now, we are seeing the tides shifting in favor of the Democratic Party. Not to say this couldn't change. I think it will change. However, it hasn't changed with over 500,000 votes cast from the last time I brought up this point. So weirder things have happened this year, but entering into 2021, the Democratic Party should be very happy based off the turnout now. They've seen roughly 1 in 4 registered voters actually vote in this election. That's a lot. 1 in 4 registered voters. That is a lot. In 2020, we saw 57%, so roughly 1 in 2 voters, just a little bit over 1 in 2 voters. More so, 3 in 5 voters voted in the early voting capability, whether through mail, whether in person. Overall turnout was very high early in the state of Georgia, and it looks like it may be on track to match that. And if it does match that, the Democratic Party could be in for 2 Senate seats to win. So when we look at these demographic numbers, things can change, but the question is, will they? But if they hold as they are today, entering into the regular election day, in-person voting day, I think the Republican Party should actually start becoming very worried, and start to analyze how many people they need to get out to vote, start to analyze what can they still do to win, because right now the early voting numbers benefit the Democratic Party. No other way to draw that conclusion. The only demographic group that is, above 50%, 50% or more of their 2020 turnout are black voters. And there are still 12 days to go until this election. And of course, we will see in-person turnout on election day. So only one demographic group that consistently votes for the Democratic Party in very deafening margins. And I have no doubt that the Democratic Party is looking at these early voting numbers and are very happy about it, but are still apprehensive because it's still Georgia. It's still a state that is predominantly Republican, that is probably going to be very good to the Republican Party, even moving past this Donald Trump defeat. But anything is possible at this point. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today. Actually, tomorrow.